We are so blessed to have so many awesome student worship leaders, are we not? I mean, they're amazing. Come on. Be excited. Hey, why don't you look to your neighbor real fast and just give him a high five. Say, you're amazing. And look to the other neighbor and say, you're amazing. You picked the right seat today. I'm glad you're family. So good. Guess what? 1 week down, baby. 1 week down. When you're running a marathon, you count the weeks. Am I right? 1 week down. Great job, guys. Hey, listen, on Fridays in Family Chapel throughout this fall semester, we are taking our time to look at the famous Sermon on the Mount. If sermons and speeches are dictated upon their ripple effect in terms of their influence and impact, then I would say that the Sermon on the Mount is not only the greatest sermon of all time, but it is in fact the greatest speech of all time, if we measure based on impact and ripple effect. And we'll be spending all semester looking at this sermon that only takes about 15 to 20 minutes to read. So I would encourage you at some point this semester, sit down with it and read it all the way through in one sitting. It is that powerful. The great St. Augustine called the Sermon on the Mount the perfect standard of the Christian life. And this challenging manifesto, spanning 3 chapters, Matthew 5, 6, and 7, paints for the people of God and all of us, really as humans in this world, a picture of the good life. But more specifically, a portrait of what it looks like to live as citizens in the kingdom of God, under the rule and reign of King Jesus. A kingdom which happens to be upside down in comparison to the world. The vibe or the aura or the way of life in the kingdom is in fact upside down from the way of the world. It is like walking on the ceiling. Have you ever seen those trippy YouTube videos of people like walking on the ceiling? There's a museum in Miami called the Paradox Museum where you can, quote unquote, walk on the ceiling. That's what life in the kingdom is like in comparison to the world. It is upside down. Or you could say it is actually right side up. A reversal from the world. However, underneath it all, something more is happening in this sermon. Something more is happening than a killer lecture or an awesome TED Talk. Let's go to Matthew chapter 5, starting in verse 17, where the teaching really kicks off for Jesus. When you're there, say, I'm there. Come on. Hear the word of the Lord. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I tell you. Now when Jesus says this, he's basically saying, listen up. Pay attention to what I'm about to say. Until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of a pen will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. Someone say accomplished. This means that Jesus is actually out to do something, to accomplish something, To bring something into existence is what the Greek connotes here, for something to become. Therefore, anyone who sets aside one of the least of these commands and teaches others accordingly will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever practices, someone say practice. Pastor Andrea talked about this last week, this idea of practice, and he uses this word to bookend the entire sermon in Matthew 5 and in Matthew chapter 7. And it's used about 16 times in the Greek throughout the Sermon on the Mount. Because kingdom people, as we learned last week, are practitioners. We are practitioners of this way of life. And he says, whoever practices and teaches these commands will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. This is the word of the Lord. Question for you. How many of you just love to binge watch television shows? Any binge watchers out there, right? 3 seasons in 3 days, baby. Let's do it. Some of you, that was Labor Day weekend. In your dorm room, binge watching some random show on Netflix or Hulu. But here's the problem with binge watching shows. It eliminates the buildup. Like, we're supposed to go through an emotional toll when we watch a drama. Like, get wrapped up in the show, you know what I'm talking about? When you binge watch it, it's kind of hard to do that. It's just one after the other. I remember when I finished watching the show Friday Night Lights. Anybody know Friday Night Lights? Yeah? Showing your age, some of you. Okay. Some of the young folks are like, what's Friday Night Lights? Go watch it, change your life. And I remember when Friday Night Lights was over, I felt like something from my soul was taken from me. Like something was gone, man. There was a void that was left when Friday Night Lights ended. So either that says something about the show or something about me. I don't know, but regardless, something was taken from me. But there is one show right now that you cannot binge watch, that you actually have to wait for the new episode. I hear the rumblings already. And there are only 2 episodes left. And the finale is on September 17th. And do you know what that show is called? It's called The Summer I Turned Pretty. Do you hear the high-pitched shrill in the room? Now, just curious, how many boyfriends are also watching the show? Come on. It's a moment of confession here in chapel. Grace is sufficient for you, my brother. I was actually, I was talking to one of our SBCs yesterday, Michael Lowman, gonna give him a little shout out. And we were talking about lodgeball, because lodgeball was so hype. It was awesome. I was there with my kids, my wife was playing, it was awesome. And I was talking to Michael about it. I was like, Michael, did you go to lodgeball last night? And he's like, I didn't. I said, why? It was amazing. He said, bro, I was watching Summer I Turned Pretty. Conrad, Jeremiah, who are we working with here? Which one? Which team? Okay. Hey. All right. The energy level has rose to a new level in this place. Revival is coming, friends. But listen, I bet in the last episode of The Summer I Turned Pretty, all the dots will connect. Things will begin to make sense. The final pieces will be added to complete the puzzle. Questions will be answered that we've all had all along. But I bet there will be a twist. And Jesus, let's bring it back to Jesus, am I right? Jesus an unattractive contractor from middle of nowhere Galilee, whose birth is suspect at best, throws the greatest plot twist we have ever seen in the history of narrative, story, and drama. A la Moses in Exodus, going up on Mount Sinai to receive the law or the teaching or the instruction of God, making up the Torah or the first 5 books of the Tanakh or the Old Testament. Jesus also goes up on a mountainside, but as God in the flesh, the incarnate one, to not receive the law or the teaching, but to deliver a teaching, which happens to be the first of 5 blocks of teaching in the gospel according to Matthew. Not only is he Moses-like, not only is he giving a teaching reminiscent of Moses on this mountainside, he is claiming that he is in fact the teaching. He is the finale. He is the key. He is the final puzzle piece to bring the whole point into focus. He doesn't do away with the series. He doesn't do away with the Old Testament, but rather he completes it. He fulfills it. He translates it. He gives clarity to it. And in this one claim, he is saying, I am the interpretation of the whole story. I am the one you've been looking for. I am the climax. I am the point. It's actually all about me. Talk about a TV series. 39-season show called Mosaic has come to a fulfillment and a completeness in Jesus with this proclamation and in this claim. And no one saw it coming. The New Testament scholar Scott McKnight says, to fulfill or complete means history has come to its fulfillment in Jesus himself. That is, in his life, death, resurrection, and his exaltation, and in his teachings. In so doing, as the fulfillment of the law and the teaching of the Torah, as he is launching his kingdom project, Jesus is also showing us how he read and interpreted the Bible. And by doing so, how we are to read and interpret the Bible. We interpret through Jesus. He does this also with the disciples on the Emmaus Road in Luke chapter 24, where he starts with Moses, as the text says, and walks all the way through as it leads up to him. And from this point forward, over the next few verses, he gives 6 different practical, real-life case studies or examples of how kingdom people are to go beyond the religious leaders and their way of living or their righteousness in order that we might enter into this kingdom. Enter into this way of life. Enter into this journey with Jesus as King and as Lord by saying, this is what you have heard all along. But low-key, this is what God intended. You have heard it said, but I say. And I just want us to consider one of those case studies this morning. So let's jump ahead to Matthew chapter 5, verse 27. You have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. But I tell you that anyone, say anyone, who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Jesus, the fulfillment of the law, the interpreter of the story of God and the story of humanity, unmasks that the kingdom of God is ultimately about quality of action, not just the quantity of our actions. Not just about what we do, but how we do it. He goes right after the human heart. The heart serves as a sort of director or the CEO or the chief integrator of your life, the seat of your desires, your longings, your dispositions, your intentions, your pursuits, and your attitude, all of which must be reformed and realigned. Jesus is going after an inside-out vision of transformation. He's going after a reformation of our character. The heart, friends, is upstream from all of our actions, upstream from all of our behavior. Whatever is upstream will eventually come downstream. Whatever has your heart shapes your actions and shapes your behavior. Jesus is not just looking at doing the right things. He's not just calling us to do righteousness. He's actually inviting us to become the kinds of people who live rightly. To become righteous. And he is exposing the malaligned heart, or that malaligned center of our person. The assumption was, as long as you don't touch, as long as you don't act, you're good. But Jesus takes us deeper and further back, transcending the law, transcending the way in which the Pharisees lived externally. And what he does is that he actually takes us behind the curtain or behind the closed door and says, that's what needs to be transformed. That's what needs to be made new. And here's why. What happens behind the curtain will always come out on stage. What happens in the locker room eventually comes out on the field. What happens in the dark eventually is exposed by the light. What happens behind closed doors eventually comes out into the living room of our life. If our life is a house, as it's compared to often in the scriptures, whatever happens behind closed doors is eventually going to come into the living room. And in this example, he juxtaposes adultery and lust. He says, whoever looks lustfully has committed adultery in their heart. Jesus in this statement is making a statement about reality. He's making a diagnosis of the heart. He is looking at the intention. Notice he doesn't say, don't look. He says, whoever looks lustfully. He clarifies. Because it is one thing to look or to notice, but it is another thing to stare, to gaze, to fix our eyes, to study. You know, the act of lusting can be defined as the visual consumption of another for the sake of one's own pleasure and fantasy. The Greek word means to crave with heated desire. And as human persons, we all have heated desire and passion. But to look lustfully is to consume another for the sake of one's own pleasure. By definition, lust turns another person into an object of self-gratification, turning a someone into a something, possessing another in the mind as a sort of visual slavery. Which ultimately dehumanizes the other, stripping them of their dignity. Lust is the antithesis of love. It is the opposite of love. Love is personal. It's about a person. Lust is purely about an experience. Lust is about grabbing and taking, where love is about receiving and welcoming. Now, this is not about acknowledging beauty or even attraction. That's natural. We're all going to be attracted over the course of our life. That's a natural process, but it's an attempt. Lust is an attempt at possession of the beautiful. And any attempt at possessing the beautiful always pollutes it. Always pollutes it. Looking lustfully is whenever you say to yourself, as a guy or girl walks by, this is what I would do to her. Or this is what I would do to him. That is to objectify them, turning them into a tool for pleasure, seeing them as a means to an end rather than as an end in and of themselves. And we live in an age where private sexual fantasies have been capitalized, commodified, and normalized in public, building pornography into an estimated $100 billion industry, going to show us all that your private life behind the curtain that quote unquote isn't hurting anyone has generated an entire economic stage. 61% of the entire population views pornography. 54% of Christians view pornography. 22% once a week. It's an entire industry. And where did it begin? Behind closed doors, in private. Which shows us this important reality. Private sin always has public implications. Your private sin has public implications. Your private sin behind closed doors has social implications because sin fundamentally is relational. It has implications. What's upstream always flows downstream. And what Jesus subverts in this case study is not desire itself, but desire aimed at the wrong thing. Desire wrongfully spent. I asked my soon-to-be 4-year-old girl this morning, I said, Selah, just to try to get a nice little metaphor for this morning. I said, Selah, if I gave you $1,000, what would you buy with it? She has no concept of money. She said 2 things, a princess dress and slime. Princess dress and slime. Let's be honest, that's not the best use of $1,000. That's not money well spent. We have to reconsider how we are spending our desire or aiming our desire and ask, is it worthy? We just sang about who else is worthy? Who or what else is worthy of this passion within me? That is the question we have to ask ourselves. It's not just the elimination of desire, but it's redirecting our disordered desires. Because here's how desire works. The more you feed it, the more you need it. Anna Lembke is a psychiatrist and wrote the New York Times bestseller, Dopamine Nation. Finding balance in the age of indulgence. Not a Christian author, not a Christian book. But in it, she explains the more pleasure we experience, the more dopamine that is released and required to maintain that level of satisfaction. Because pleasure and pain are in the same part of the brain, and they function like a teeter-totter, always seeking balance. The stronger the indulgence, the more our brain adapts by down-regulating the pain side, tilting more toward pain at first in order for homeostasis or balance to occur, which accounts for hangovers, letdowns, and guilt, shame, and remorse. She says, if we don't stop indulging, eventually we don't act for pleasure, but just to feel normal. And when we move in that direction, it turns itself into an addiction, just to be normal. But it must be said that lust, craving, disorder, desire, and indulgence are not purely a pornography thing. And it's not purely a male thing either. It impacts all of us and in a variety of ways. Here are a few different ways for you as we begin to kind of land the plane this morning. The first way is through that spicy novel that has captured your attention and has you fixated. Or you texting that girl at midnight saying, "What you doing?" Let me tell you what she's doing, bro. She's asleep. And here's a suggestion for you. Go to bed. Get some sleep. Listen, sister, if a bro texts you WYD, don't respond. Don't respond. And if a bro says WYD, let me tell you something, dog. You're not ready to be a husband. You're not ready for a fine woman. You're not ready to be a father. And you're not ready for a JOB. This might be the last time I preach in chapel. Here's another thing. Freshman mating season? Sister, let me tell you this. He's not your husband. He's 18 and he sleeps till noon. And his mom in the summer still makes him PB&J. So he's not your husband. Stop fixating on him. So many of these things take up our attention and our mind. Compulsive buying, clothes, food, TV shows, all kinds of media. Your Explore page on Instagram will tell me more about where your attention is than anything else. And many of these are forms of self-medication and unhealthy coping mechanisms, distracting ourselves to death, trying to satisfy a hunger for God. Our heart is restless until it finds rest in God. I'm gonna have the band to come back up. And as they do, my question for you, friend, is are you struggling to live? Because chasing one high after another, chasing one experience after another, trying to satiate your infinite desires with a finite created world, it's leaving you not only hopeless, but anxious and restless. And Jesus came that we might have life and life to the full, to satiate our infinite desires. The theologian Sarah Coakley said, desire, or even fallen desire, is the precious clue woven into the crooked human heart that ever reminds it of its relatedness and its source. The desire you have within you, that heated passion, is just a signpost to the source of the one who has given you the desire for himself. The furnace of your heart, friends, longs for wholeness. That's why you keep looking. Only the manifest presence of God satisfies the burning passion in you, because what you want is the divine. What you want is God. Eros, which is usually translated as romantic love, is actually the drive to wholeness and beauty, divine beauty, to oneness. So we don't eliminate the erotic desire in us, we aim it properly. We don't eliminate the fire and furnace, we convert it into an altar, offering our bodies as a living sacrifice to the all-consuming fire of God. The synapses between the mind and the heart is the imagination. And what Jesus is going after here is the imagination. And he says that to reform our heart ultimately is to consider what we are looking at with our eyes, what we are giving our attention. Later in the Sermon on the Mount, he will talk about how the eye is a lamp to the body. If it's healthy, the body is healthy. If it's unhealthy, the body is dark. Our heart is reformed through what we behold. It's through our attention that our heart is gripped. And what has your attention has your heart. Dr. Lanta Davis, in her book, Becoming by Beholding, says this: what you behold is what you become. So what ultimately has your attention today? What you are beholding, friends, is what is holding your being. There is a gravity of attention, a gravity of the mind. Whatever goes in your attention will settle down ultimately into your heart. Where your eyes go, your life will go with it. If you don't believe me, try driving down the road and just look at the ditch the whole time while you're driving. See where your car lands up. See where your car lands. In the ditch. My first wreck ever was in the ditch. Do you know why? My eyes were not on the road. And we follow someone who has invited us into a narrow road. And the invitation for us today is to consider where our attention and our eyes are. Jesus is not only the fulfillment of the law, but the fulfillment of your imagination. He is not a fantasy. He is a person who is alive and active, seated at the right hand of the Father, interceding on your behalf right now, inviting you. His attention is on you. Attention means to reach toward. And you don't have to reach toward him first, because he's already reaching towards you today, wanting your attention. Hebrews 12:2 says, fix your eyes upon Jesus. We don't just look, we don't just glance, but we attach our attention to Jesus. So 2 practices for us. 1, consider changing the wallpaper on your phone to a picture of Jesus. Very simple practice. Put Jesus as the first thing that you see on that little glowing rectangle in your pocket. And the second thing, when you find yourself being tempted to lust, lift your eyes physically. Lift your eyes to the heavens, reminding you of the one who ultimately satisfies your desires. Some of the first words of John the Baptist were these: look, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. He wants you to be free today, friend. He wants you in his presence, and you want him. May your heart, may the furnace of your being, the heated passion within you, be converted into an altar. I pray that the eyes of your heart may be enlightened in order that you today, friend, may know. Let us turn our eyes upon Jesus.